Good morning here from Florida on December 22, just a few days before Christmas. Okay, I purchased 5 GoFlight modules recently to use with my X-Plane, and I'm going to talk just briefly about how I program them with a Rotate MD80. The reason I did this plane is because there are no downloads available for it currently, and I figured it'd be fun to learn how all the systems worked with regard to programming the aircraft with GoFlight modules. Okay, so quickly, GoFlight, they sell modules, hardware modules similar to joystick or yoke, components that you can plug into USB ports and interact with your simulator. In my case, X-Plane. So this one here, this is an autopilot module, an Efus module, transponder. I have all three. Well, I have that one. I have the transponder, and I have the flat switch, and 2 of the nav radios. I use one for comm, one for nav. So let me just make some quick statements. This is shit. I mean, I wouldn't even buy it. This is so non-reliable, undependable that just don't waste your money. This is great. This is literally the most dependable component I've bought from them. This works very well. There's a few idiosyncrasies that I would like to figure out. This actually works really well too. So very well, pretty decent, great, and just terrible. I'm sorry, and this is great too. Works like a charm. All right, so to use GoFlight modules with X-Plane, you have to download a component from PollyPot software out of the UK, and they sell the GoFlight interface tool for X-Plane. And once you download their tool and you pay for it, it's about $38 US. Yeah, this is what it looks like over here. So let's move these out of the way to talk a little bit about how I program these modules. So what I did for the Rotate MD80, which is it's an MD88, as I decided, I want to program these light switches, so that I don't have to basically continually come down here in the cockpit and select these manually, these light switches and all the light switches over here, and also some light switches inside the cockpit. So I have a GoFlight interface running here. Before you can program these, there's a lot to learn, but the simplest thing to understand is that X-Plane has events and variables that can be manipulated, and GoFlight is a tool that allows you to do that. So you can download a component called the data ref editor, and I can show you where that is later. But with the data ref editor, you can show data refs, and data refs, just think of those as variables. And so anytime something's happening in the cockpit, maybe you change a value, you can find that doing a little bit of searching and try to narrow it down to the value that's being updated. So if I wanted to search on like speed, we'll just type that and see. Okay, that's speed. You can see now it's narrowed down the items in the aircraft that are related to speed. And so maybe let's type airspeed. Yeah, okay, so there's airspeed. And up here now we can see there are a few items that are related to airspeed. Airspeed is Mach. This is it's a Boolean 1 or 0 or 1. So when I programmed my air traffic control module, they call it the MCP Pro. When I programmed that and I wanted to know that, when I'm selecting my speed and seeing it, if it's in Mach versus indicated airspeed, then I can make decisions based on that. Okay, so I'm going to close that because I don't need to show it for this example. But like I said, here's the module interface, and this shows you the different modules. The ones you don't own are going to be disabled, but the different modules that you have connected currently, that it detects, are connected, so on and so forth. This guy here, this is for the transponder component. I cannot recommend it. It's really not worth the money. It's a waste of time. It's really easier just to go into the cockpit and change the transponder settings yourself. Despite not wanting to do that, it's not reliable. Okay, one thing that you're going to run into before I go too farther is that everything's a USB component, and GoFlight recommends that everything be plugged into USB 1 or 2. I have 2 USB 3.0 hubs, and I found that it doesn't matter. You can use 1, 2, 3. It's not relevant. The important thing is it needs to be powered, because some of these components, especially the transponder and the radios, they draw a lot more power. And so if you're not using a powered USB hub, they're not going to work. And Windows 10, as tricky as it tries to be, is if you don't tell it to allow the hub to power itself, it'll decide. So you go into the device manager and you can work your way down in here to your USB controllers, and you can see all these guys. You need to select every single one of them after everything's plugged in, after you have all your modules plugged in. Go to each one, go to Properties, go to Power Management, and make sure Allow the computer to turn off this device. Uncheck. Don't allow Windows to do that. You want to make sure that your USB hubs are being managed by the cables that they're using when they're powered in. You're going to do the same thing for human interface devices. In any one of these that says USB input device, same thing. Right click, Properties, Power Management, and make sure that's not checked. Okay. All right, so let's go back to the GoFlight interface tool for X-Plane. So I've loaded the Rotate MD88, and I have the interface running. And I'm going to program the T8. I'm actually show you what I did to program the T8, which is my switch panel. So first thing you need to do is you need to go to Settings. No, I'm sorry, you have to go to Status and click Detective. And Detective is a tool that allows you to define events, custom events that you're going to use to control, things that happen inside the simulator. I'm going to shrink the simulator up here a little bit so we can have a better view at this dialogue. There's a lot going on in this dialogue. Quickly point out a few things. What you see here, when I click Monitoring, I'm going to select that. It's going to go and monitor everything that it's detecting that's happening, all the events and all the variables that X-Plane is telling it about. We're seeing the same thing over and over again because I have X-Plane pause. So come over here and remove the pause. Now it says, oh, look at all this stuff that I'm gonna have available, and you will have that available to you for you to manage any kind of changes and events and variables that you can take advantage of. Okay, so all this up here, these are variables. They're all associated with variables. Everything inside of here in the middle, these are all associated with events. And down here, this whole section is so you can program and create your own events. Those events, when you create your own, are called bespoke events. When I created all mine, I prefaced them all with BE for bespoke, the part of the aircraft that I'm programming, and some indication of what's happening, so I will understand. This is bespoke autopilot flight director 1 on. You can name it whatever you want, though. It doesn't matter. Efus range 10, 20, 48. These are all different things I've programmed, and you can see it's not a lot, but it's a few things that help me quite a bit when I'm trying to fly the plane in X-Plane. Okay, so we're going to go back over to the T8. We're going to look at the T8, and so when you want to come into the GoFlight interface tool and see what you've programmed, you come up here to the top and you select it. If I own multiple T8s, you'd see device 0, device 1, and so on. I only have one. Select that. You make sure enabled is selected, and you're going to see these switches. There's 8 switches here, and just to show you what that's talking about, go back over to GoFlight products, and you can see this is my T8 module that I own, and they're going to be 8 switches. They're just toggle switches, and they're just on-off. So, and that's what these are pertaining to. I've programmed every one of them. If I click them, you're going to see things down here are changing. So you can see beacon, strobe, so on and so forth. And so we'll just pick the beacon. That's probably the easiest one. So the beacon in the MD88 is this guy, the anti-collision beacon. Okay, and so I had to define an event that would allow me in my GoFlight module to click that particular item on my physical hardware, my physical panel that sits on my desk, and I want that event to be associated with making sure that this turns off and on. Okay, so what you do again is you have to create an event with when on happens, and there's going to be an event that happens when off happens, and you can see mine went from beacon off to to beacon on. And then there's light data. We could talk about that a little later, but really what light data is if you have some kind of indicator on your GoFlight module. In my case, there's a lot of LED lights. There's one for every switch. Do you want that to light up? And when you do, under what circumstances do you want it to light up? And so for me, I check this variable. This is a custom variable, which is what I would find up here, these custom variables from Rotate. Say, hey, when this particular variable, the anti-collision light switch, is on, when this switch has a value of 1, turn on the LED that's associated with the switch. If I come over here to this switch, I have my landing lights. Same thing. If my nose light switch has a value of 2, then turn on the light on the T8 switch panel. This is going to take a little bit of trial and error. You're going to have to kind of figure out what does what, and that's where the data ref that I showed earlier, the data ref editor, is going to help you, track down some of these things. So it's just going to take, like I said, some trial and error, and you have to sort of do a little hunting and pecking on your own to figure it out. But it's not really that hard. It's timely, but it's not difficult. Okay, so let's go again and look at the beacon. Okay, so how do I do this? I have a beacon, BE lights beacon on, and I have a BE lights beacon off that I showed you with the on-off selection here. So what did I do? I came in here, and when I was programming, I was picking variables, maybe events that I needed to happen when the switch was turned off or on inside the cockpit. And so once I was able to track down what does happen, I can add these. I'll go over here to BA beacon. Where are you at? BA. I'm sorry. Give me a moment. It might be right in front of me. And okay, I saw it. Beacon on. So what I discovered through a little bit of trial and error, clicking items inside the cockpit and seeing the results that I see over here, I was able to say, okay, this is the kind of thing that happens when I turn this switch from off to on. And so what you need to do is, this has been running for a little while, and you come over here and you say, all right, let's look at everything that's been detected. Let's just select it. Say, let's hide this. I don't want to keep seeing this, all these data scroll across the list. So hide it. And now, sorry, I didn't pick it, did I? Select everything and hit hide. Now it stops. So I just like to clear the screen so there's nothing in here. So let's go over here, and I'm going to switch the anti-collision beacon from off to on. I hit it, and you see this stuff here happen. So I'm going to do a real quick print screen so I don't lose it. And so these are the things that happened, okay? And open that up. And naturally it opened up on the other monitor. Okay, so you could see a few things happen here that are relevant. You can see that the anti-collision light switch was changed from 0 to 1. The beacon lights are switched to on. This beacon on variable switched from 0 to 1. And some of the brightness, I found that all these brightness ratios, this isn't something you have to worry about. These things actually happen on their own based on these changes. You make these changes, and all of this is happening inside of X-Plane. And really what this is doing, since it's a beacon light, you can kind of figure out what it's doing. It's taking each one of these different values and changing it from 0 to 1 so that you actually see inside the simulator. If you go outside of the plane, you'll see the flashing beacon. It's not very likely that we'll see it since it's daytime. But yeah, there you go. That's what's happening, okay? So let's go back over here to inside the cockpit. And we'll work our way back over here to the beacon light switch. Okay, and so go back to how we would program it. I have these guys here, like I said, the rotate MD80 lights, anti-collision switch, this variable and this variable, and they've just switched to a value of 1. I don't really know what they switched from, but I've done this so I know these are zeros that change to 1. And so you have to find them. Anything that starts with rotate, in this case, this is custom because it's based on the vendor of the aircraft. So I come into the custom area and make sure everything's selected. Actually, it doesn't matter if everything's selected. And you could type all of this. You can type just some of this to try to narrow it down. But the point is, type what you need to so that when you hit search, it's going to show up here in the search tab. So I'll type light switch, because I don't feel like typing all of it. And there it is. There's a lot of other things, but there's the anti-collision light switch. So if I'm going to create my own bespoke event, we'll go ahead and start from start. I'd say, okay, we're going to create it, and we're just going to call it bespoke event test for YouTube video. Okay, hit enter, and now you've got this event, and you need to add some stuff to it. So again, we said this light switch needs to be changed to a value of 1. So you make sure it's selected here, and you say, I'm setting it to a value of whatever you type here, and I'll type 1, and I'll hit enter, or you can hit the checkbox. And so you can say, okay, cool, the anti-collision light switch is going to be changed to a value of 1 when this bespoke event is used. Okay, so what's the next thing it needs to do? It says, okay, I need to change the beacon lights on and the beacon on from these two variables to a value of 1. If it doesn't start with rotate and it starts with sim, it's going to be standard. I've just found that through some trial and error that that's where it comes from. So beacon lights on. I don't know if I mentioned it, but this is not case sensitive when you're searching in here. So if it's upper or lower, it doesn't matter. It's still gonna, my search, oh, I misspelled it. Beacon lights on. And there you go. Beacon lights on. That's the guy here that I need to program. So I'd select him, and I'd say set to a value of 1, just like it has here. Enter. And let's go ahead and rapidly do this other one. This is beacon on. So come back over to standard, select that, and we'll type beacon on. And there it is. Sim cockpit 2 switches beacon on, which is sim cockpit 2 switches beacon on. Select it, hit set, value of 1, and enter. So now I have a bespoke event that's going to do exactly what happened when I went from off to on. I'm sorry, off to on. And so you could test it. You could test any bespoke event you want to make sure that what happens is what you want to happen. So let's go over here and let's switch it back to off. And what is going to happen if I click the test bespoke event, we should expect that these 3 things happen. And so I want you to look over here, and I'm going to click the test bespoke event. When I click it, this should switch from off to on. So here we go. Look at that, switch from off to on. And you could see the event data that we saw a while back also happened. Okay, so let's just do the opposite. Let's go from off to on. All right, I can click off to on here, or I'm sorry, on to off, and I know from experience that what's going to happen is these 3 variables, the same one I have defined here, they're actually going to switch to 0. They're all going to go from 1 to 0. So you can go through the same thing I went through. I can come up here and I can create a bespoke event. I can find these variables and add them and set values. I can do that manually, but since this is literally just a flip of what I did before, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do all that work. So you can come over here and you can click the copy the current bespoke event to a new one, and I can say new, and you can see I can just give it another name. We'll just call it test 2. Hit enter, and now it's here. It's a new one, but it's got all the same things that happened for my bespoke event that I just created beforehand. Okay, you can see it's exactly the same thing. But I want them to go from 1 to 0. So all I'm going to do is select each one. I'm going to come down here to where it says edit, hit edit, and I'll change it to a 0. And I'm going to do this for all 3. Edit to 0, edit to 0, and edit this guy to 0. Okay? And so now I have a test 2 for YouTube video, and I have my test for YouTube. You can see these are all being switched to 1, and these are all going to be switched to 0. So I can see the anti-collision is already on. So let's test the second one, which we said, hey, I think this is going to change it to off. I'm going to click this, and there you go, it switched to off. Now something you can't see is that on my actual physical component, the actual T8 that I own, the switch didn't move. Naturally, a hardware switch isn't going to physically move, but the lights associated with that particular item also switched. Okay, and I'll show you how that happened before. We can kind of look back at what I talked about with the light data. So there's an item called anti-collision light switch. Okay, and this particular variable, like I said, is associated with a value. when the light switch, when the collision is on, I found that that particular variable has a value of 1. When this switch is off, that variable has a value of 0. Okay, so I said when the beacon lights, when the beacon light event, let me back up. 2 events. I'm sorry, 2 events for the beacon light. There's an on and off, and hold I'm not entirely sure about. It certainly isn't supported with the T8. But we're going to assign the beacon lights on to the on. We're going to assign the beacon lights off to the off, and those we defined here the same way we did with the BE test 2 for YouTube video and BE test for YouTube video. And when I change those, I'm sorry, when I do these, this particular variable here has an actual value of 0, 1. And we can actually narrow that down by going back over here to the plugins. And this is originally how I found it in the data ref editor plugin. I came in here and I spent some time, but I said, all right, let's just try to find this thing. And I'll start, I'm sorry, this part is case sensitive. So light, switch, okay, whoop, what did I mistype? Light, oh, okay, there you go. Light, switch, and look at that. There's nothing there. You know why? Unfortunately, this is not a core variable, a core data ref associated with Xplane. This is a data ref that comes from the vendor. So let's close this. This was trial and error. You know, I said, okay, I know that this is an anti-collision light switch because it says anti-collision light switch, and I just went searching for it, and I finally found it. There's a lot in here. You see, I've selected. It's just taken a minute. It's a lot of different things, different variables that are associated with different things, and it's not just the vendor. There's a lot in here. It's not just rotate. I keep scrolling down. You can see these are actually Xplane variables. But the key is to find the variable that's being changed, so that you can say, hey, when this variable changes value, I want, if that thing has a value of on, I'm sorry, if this variable has a value of 1, turn the light on my physical T8 module. And what we're talking about, just for clarity, these lights right here, these LED lights. So switching my module back and forth from off to on, that's all good. Let's take a quick switch. So switching from off to on, that's all fine, but I want to make sure that when it is on, this guy lights up right here. Okay, so that's really what we're talking about. So let's see how it all works. Okay, I've set all this up, and you know what? Let's switch these. Let's say that when the event that we just created, we created one called the test for YouTube video. When that's switched to off, which I can see right up here. This was our BE test 2 for YouTube video. That's the one that switched it to off. I'll assign that there. And I'm going to come over here to on, and we're going to assign the on switch to the other one that we made, which was BE test for YouTube vid. Okay, so if you remember when we were over here and we were defining these events, these bespoke events, we were able to define what happens, what variables get changed when these events happen. Okay, so look at this, we're in off mode, and I'm going to try the one that switches me to on again. I'll test it, and you can see that changed. I go back to off, the BE test for 2, which was turning it to off. I'll click test, and we can see that it turned off. All right, so let's see how it all works. I've created these. I've actually added them here to the switch, and I'm going to now go over to my module, my physical GoFlight module, and you can't see this, unfortunately, but I want you to kind of pay attention to this, and let's see what happens when I actually switch what I've assigned to the beacon lights. And let's see, here we go, on. There you go, look at that, off, I'll switch it again, on I mean, switch it again, off, on, off. And I'm doing this on a piece of hardware sitting on my desk, and that piece of hardware is the GoFlight TE2 flat switch panel. So that's really cool. And so the idea with these modules is you're going to have to go through this work for all of the different buttons and rotary dials, switches. There's different components on the Efus. Let me go back and I'll show you the Efus. It's not really a rotary, it's sort of a rotary dial, this particular component here. And I've used this, I've mapped out so that when I turn these switches, I'm able to affect I don't know what's going on with this website, but I'm able to affect what actually happens inside the aircraft for my map toggle here. When I've got all my flight plan set up here, I can switch the tabs on the Efus, and those actually will switch these guys here. So these components, these physical hardware components from GoFlight, they're really kind of built around a 737, but it doesn't mean you can't come into another aircraft and utilize those same features. So let's just real quickly go over to the Efus so I can show you what I'm talking about. And if I'm mispronouncing it, if it's Efus, Efus, whatever, forgive me, I don't even actually know what the acronym means, but that's not relevant for this video. So this particular component has a lot more. It's got this rotary, this rotary, this rotary, 4 different buttons. That's what it has on this particular plane. Now this the Efus module, the physical Efus module, actually supports a lot more. But so we're going to focus on, we'll select it, enable it, and let's focus on turning the rotary for the, let's see, selector range. Let's use that because I think that's what I'm looking for. Selector range, and this is the kind of thing I'm trying to play with. And so there's no light associated with this, so that's why I have there's no input action. I'm sorry, there's no display data action that would be here as there was with the T8. You can see there's light data. With the Efus that doesn't exist, but we still need to say, hey, when we're in position 1, let's use this bespoke event. When we're in position 2, let's use this bespoke event. Position 4, that one, and so on and so forth. So I've created these events, and I think all I did in these events is just set a particular variable. So let's look over here real fast to make sure that that's an accurate statement. Let's see, I've got BE, Efus, where are they at, Chris? PE Efus 80, and that's all it does. Yeah, it says, okay, let's make this particular variable, this custom, which would have come from here, this custom vendor-specific variable for nav display range. We're just going to set it to the 3rd item, so you can see that's the 1, 2, 3. Oh, sorry, there's 0 index, so it'd be 0, 1, 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and so I said, okay, the variable nav display range, when it equals 3, which is there, I'm going to call that bespoke event, the event that I'm associating with. Let's change that variable to that value, which actually is going to spin this guy around for you. Let's call that BE Efus range 80. And so that's what I have here. I've said position 3, I'm sorry, position 4. It's funny that it's 0-based index, but in here they actually use position 1. So this is actually the 0th location here, and the 1st and the 2nd. But you'll start to learn that that's how it behaves, and it's a little weird, but a little bit of an inconsistency, but that's okay. All right, so I've demonstrated. I think I've shown here that we have all these different positions, and I've associated these with different. Hang on a second. Well, that's a tricky one. See, number 7. The Efus itself on my desk actually has, I'm looking at it right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It has 7 different positions, but in the cockpit here, it doesn't. It only has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 positions, but the physical component supports 7. So when I said, hey, if I'm in the 7th position, let's not do anything. Let's just leave it alone. If I'm in the 6th, we're going to take and switch our range to 320. If I'm in the 5th, 160, the 4th. 180 and so on all the way down to 10. Okay, cool. So let's actually see it work. These are assigned already to, like I said, my Efus, my hardware, my physical GoFlight hardware component, the Efus component. And so these are already assigned to this particular, to these values for this event. Let's go back over here. I've verified that when 80 is selected, we're going to change this vendor-specific value to a value of 3. And so, watch here, I'm going to actually switch it on my physical component. I'm going to actually just kind of scroll around. You see this, it's moving around. Okay, what's really cool is not just that it's working, but if we look down here, we can see what's actually happening, right? You can see that this nav display range, this thing we're talking about right here, changes. So if I roll this guy all the way over to 10, you see the last thing it said is the vendor-specific nav display range has a value of 0. Okay, which is actually, if I go look at the Efus range 10, I've said that. I said, hey, when it's in this position, let's set the nav display range equal to 0. And what that does is it allows me to, I can do this manually, which is all well and good, but by doing this manually, now what I physically see on my desktop is a piece of hardware that's not at that location. So the whole point of using these GoFlight modules is so that you don't have to use these items in the desktop or on the X-plane cockpit. So you can focus on other things like flying the plane maybe. So I'm going to go back up here. I'm looking at this, I'm flying the aircraft. I'm doing whatever I'm doing, and I'm looking down here. I'm like, I don't want to, I'm turning the yoke. I'm trying to make sure that I know what I'm doing. I don't want to have to worry about coming over here with a mouse and start clicking these things. So instead, I can be flying. I can reach down with my GoFlight module, and I can start switching. You can see down here. If you look down, I'm sorry, I'm pointing at the screen with my finger. You can see down here that I'm actually making manipulations with my GoFlight module while I'm flying the plane. Okay, and we can also look down here in the monitoring area, and we can see that these changes are happening. Okay. So anyway, that's how the whole thing works. It's not difficult fundamentally. It's just it takes a lot of kind of hunting and pecking and looking around to figure out what variables need to be changed under what circumstances to affect some kind of change on the physical GoFlight modules. So I'm just going to do a real quick, rapid kind of wrap up here. And I'm not going to dig too much into looking at the actual bespoke events that are assigned, but I like the T8. It works great. If you look at this switch, it's going to cause my park and brake, my floodlights, my landing lights on. And I actually assigned, it's not just one thing. Okay, landing light. Well, what'd that mean? Well, actually, for me, these are, I think I've set all these to go from switch to off to on when I hit my landing light switch. So I'm going to come over here, take a peek here. I'm going to click the third switch on my actual T8 that's sitting on my desk. So I push up. Look at that. The landing light's turned on. The lights outside turned on, and the switch came here. And that was associated with BE lights landing on. I'll come in here and look at BE lights landing on. And look at that. It had quite a few things I had to change. But once I figured it all out, I was able to figure it out and create a bespoke event. And it's really about making the quick switch and click and print screen fast enough that you can see what happens. So I'm just going to clear it real fast. I'm going to flip the switch on my GoFlight module to off. Boom. Okay, so that went by really, really fast. So that's really not all that useful. Sometimes you get lucky and not too much happens, and you're able to ascertain what happened. So I'm going to switch it back to on real fast. On print screen. Okay, cool. So I hit print screen really fast, and so I was able to see, okay, what kind of things happened here, and I was able to narrow it down after some more research. Like I said, a little bit of hunting and pecking on your own. I was able to say, hey, look at this gets changed, and so on and so forth. I don't think the order really matters that much, but you could still see that these things, all these different kind of variables were changed to values of that you see on the screen here, and I'm able to take that information, create an event, name it whatever I want, and go searching for these particular variables inside the custom variables or the standard variables or even the detected variables. So that's how it all works. Now, if you want to get a little bit more advanced, you can actually create events that don't just switch variables from one value to the next. You can actually have these guys call some kind of action, and that's what these are all actions. So if I wanted to find some kind of thing that does something other than just switching a variable, and you are going to find some of these events do actually need to send some kind of a message, or a message is being sent from the simulator. I'm going to look through here real fast and see if I can narrow one down, because to be honest with you, I just don't remember. Okay, those aren't transponder. Okay, we'll come back to transponder, but because that's kind of a cool one. Lights, yeah, these are just variables. Barometer, maybe. Okay, there, cool. So the barometer up. I've created that event, and when that happens, I want to change this instrument barometer. I want to send this message, which is actually a non-vendor specific. This is an X-plane specific command that's going to happen, or an event, whatever you want to call that. So what does that mean? Scroll over here, zoom in a little bit here, and get rid of my yoke. And so there you go. You've got your barometer settings right here. So when I scroll this, what actually happens, I'm going to move it. What happens inside of X-plane is it's sending that message as well, and that message is being sent barometer up somewhere to search for it. But believe me, I hit print screen again so we can narrow it down. Boom. Okay, cool. So where is it at? Where is it at? Oh, you know what? It's not here. What happens is this particular event, this particular action, causes these different variables to be set. So, I guess theoretically, I could have gone through the long effort of saying, hey, when this gets clicked, here, go ahead and set all these particular guys to different values. But I said that's timely, just like a lot of these particular ones were relatively timely. But I did find that I didn't have to worry about setting these manually like I have in some of the other events. Here I was able to pick an actual action that happens and then just assign it to a bespoke event. So let's get rid of that. Let's go back down to the bottom. We kind of came upon the transponder up and down. We looked at that for a second. So you could do some more interesting things. I found that you can send other commands. These other commands cause the transponder. You can take the thousands, the hundreds, the tens, the zeros, which is we're actually talking about this guy here, the squawk box. So when I move this guy, you can see right here as it moves, as I rotate him around, that's actually the one of these events is being tossed. I'm pretty sure it's not these guys. It's under the transponder mode. Okay, in this particular case, it's not sending anything. It's just setting variables. And I don't want to confuse you. That can get a little confusing right now. But let's go back up to the transponder up. The transponder up is this guy. So I'm actually moving this here, moving along, and things are changing. But we're seeing the effects of this particular this particular event happening. Okay, so this event, this event, this event, this event. So I just created a switch statement which checks different values and says, hey, if the value is the value of this particular guy here, the rotate MD80 instruments transponder code switch, which I'd find in here. I just go search for him. I'll just type transponder code switch. You can narrow it down and say, hey, there that is, transponder code switch. So I created a switch statement, and I said, when he is a value of 0, let's send this. If this is a value of 1, send that. A value of 2, a value of 3, and so on and so forth. It's not easy. It takes some time. I had to go and figure out, first I was actually setting variables. I was looking at this and saying, okay, cool, what variables are being changed? And I said, oh my goodness, I'm not making good progress with that. And then I started searching inside the standard area. I started searching in the custom area for different messages, commands or events that I could actually take advantage of. And finally I just tripped upon these and I was like, oh, check that out. That's definitely, what I should be, that's what I'm looking for. Transponder ones, and there you go. Look at that, ones up and down. So I was able to say, okay, when this is being rotated clockwise, the number's going up. I was like, okay, cool. Let's take advantage of that. So I called it up. I said, okay, so if I'm on this first one, which is a value of 0, okay, and you're going to see this value of 0 by, like I said, you have to monitor what's changing over here. Maybe monitor using the data refs that I talked about in here before. And find what thing is being changed to what value. And let's get rid of this again because it's just taking up space and noising up the screen and making it more confusing. But anyways, with the transponder up, that's just a comment. I did a switch statement. So based on this particular variable, when he has a value of 0, we're gonna send this message. When he has a value of 1, send that message. 2 and 3, and so on and so forth. It wasn't entirely difficult to figure out once I did figure it out, but hopefully you can kind of glean something about what I'm doing here based on what happens in the simulator. So switch statements, if you're not a software developer, it can be confusing, but all the switch statement is kind of like an if condition. If this, do that. Well, switch statement says, okay, if such and such. And then you can say, well, if it's this or this or this or this, and that's why I have 4 different things I'm looking at. You're going to do 4 different things. And that's all that is. A switch is a really nice way to say, if such and such, then do this. Otherwise, do this. Otherwise, do this, which can be really, really long, ugly if statement. And so I could have done that. I certainly could have said, if some variable, to do such and such, followed by an if some variable, do such and such. But it's ugly looking on the screen, and this is a much more simple way to accomplish that goal. And so if you do get around to creating your own case statement based on some value, or switch statement, based on some value, you're going to actually find that value, up here, and that's what I have here. And you're going to hit the switch button, and it's going to add that line, switch, based on that particular value, and then you're going to say case, and when you type case, it's going to allow you to type something in here. And I typed 0, I hit case, I typed 1. And then I went and searched in here like we talked about, and I found these events. And I just literally just came up here, I picked it, I clicked send, and it adds another line in here. And so that's how I got from looking at what I have here to creating the switch statement to accomplish making sure that these guys rotate up and down. So it's cool, and we're on the first location. Let's test it. Test a few times. You can see it's actually increasing here. It is working, okay? And if I pick the down, same thing. It does work. Okay, I am seeing it happen. The problem is on the physical piece of hardware. The GoFlight piece of hardware that I said is really kind of a piece of garbage. The thing locks up constantly. Okay, so I mean, yeah, in theory this is great. You know, it looks cool, but unfortunately, it just isn't that good. You know, because I've got. Let's miniaturize this so we can see what's going on. I mean, here's my squawk box. Here it is simulated, sitting on my desk. Over here, I'm able to monitor the events. I'm able to create the bespoke events, and I can associate them with different. With the rotary switches. This actually pushes in and out. So I can associate it with a clockwise and a counterclockwise rotation of both being pushed in and not being pushed in. And so if I come over here and look at that, that is it's called the GF46 right here, GF46, which is the 46. I can select it, and what I have set up is here, hey, if I'm on the first option, this actually does support, if you click this button over and over again, theoretically, it supports up to 8 different, conditions that you can be in. The first one being your transponder, your second one being maybe your ADF1 or ADF2. I don't care about that. I literally bought this just for the transponder. And so we were looking at these transponder up, down, these transponder mode left and right, these events that I created earlier, and they do work. Well, let's look at the mode right. And when I hit mode right and I test, that little arrow should start moving along. So it does actually work. This isn't a problem with the GoFlight interface tool. It's not a problem with X-Plane. It's a problem with this component right here. So let's go over here and look. I said, okay, if I'm turning clockwise, do that. If I'm turning counterclockwise, do that. And we've demonstrated these do work. And the same thing for when I push the button in. I want to switch my modes, which is, like I said, these guys, the big modes. When I'm not pushing, I want to change this. If I am pushing, I want to change the mode. I can't say that I recommend the component, because you know what? I program everything right, and it just doesn't work. And I found that sometimes it works if I unplug other components that I have in the USB hub. Sometimes it works if they're all plugged in. Sometimes it does. It works if only one other one is plugged in, or it's the only one plugged in. There's no consistency. There's no rationale for why it decides to work and why it doesn't decide to work. So as much as I want it to work, and I really thought the idea of having it was going to be great, I would definitely not recommend you waste your $112 on the sale price. I think it's out of stock anyways, but they need to get their act together. I've even gone on here and I've told them, I said, this is terrible. I mean, you've written a lot of other modules that work great, but this is not one of them. So I know I've covered a lot. Zoom out real fast, and I'm going to switch some things on my actual on my T8 just so you can see. Let's go. Turn the landing lights off. Turn them on. Turn them off. I'm going to turn the beacon lights on and off. Where are you at? Beacon lights, anti-collision right there. See, on and off. I'm going to turn on my strobe lights, on and off. Panel lights. This one might be a little easier to see. Yeah, see, I have my panel lights actually associated with 2 different things down here. I have it associated with the panel and the floodlight. And so if I switch this back and forth, you should actually be able to see that the floodlight, of course, but also this panel light decreases a little bit. Okay, and you can actually see, if you look really closely, you'll see these 2 guys change when I do it as well. I can see that. And I basically went with maximum when it's on and kind of a middle of the way when it's off. So my switch right now on my desktop is actually in the off position, but I can kind of move these guys around a little bit more. Okay, and it's not going to know that really happened, especially since I'm already in the off switch location. But if I hit the switch on, I'm going to do that right now, went to max, and if I go back to off, it's going to still take me back to kind of what I wanted it to be, not what it was. To do that, it's going to take more logic and analytical thinking that I'm willing to do, and so I just don't do it. I have another one called logo lights. And when I do the logo lights, it turns on the tail light, some of the wing lights, and I could switch it, but you're not going to really see anything, so it's not even worth showing. I have a couple more that I've assigned to my T8, which is for engine cutoff and idle. So I kind of was just running out of buttons and what I would assign to them, so I just said, okay, cool, there's a switch. I'll switch it on, I'll switch it off, on, off, the other one on, off. I'll do them both at the same time. So that was just kind of cool. That way I can, when I'm firing up the engine, I can fire it up, let it go. Then I can come back in here. I can kind of look around, go back into the cockpit, see what's going on. And then when I know it's kind of wound up, I can see the nitrogen coming up to around 10 is when I fire it up. Then on my T8, I don't touch this on my T8. I just switch it to on, and the engine fires up, and I don't have to worry about yet another cockpit component that I just don't want to have to deal with. Okay, well, before I go, let's switch down to the radio, not the squawk box, which I said I just can't recommend. But look at the comm radio. I'm going to make changes here. I'm actually doing this with a physical piece of hardware, and that is this guy here. Dun, 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 dun. Him right here. This is probably one of the coolest ones too, because it just works out of the box. I didn't even have to do anything. But he is, put him over here. I've got him associated with this guy, and I'm letting him be my COM1. And there's also the whole COM2 concept. And this button here and this button here, what those actually do, the way it's programmed, is if you click this, it sets this as the radio. What you see on here, the 121 and the 119, those are going to be associated with what's being displayed here. And if you select the one on the right, what you're going to see in the frequencies of the radio is what you see right here. So let's kind of demonstrate that. Miniaturize him out of the way. And let's demonstrate what happens on my component. It's called the GF166. I'm going to click the button on the far right on the bottom. Okay. Oh, you know what? This isn't going to help you very much, because what you see what you see on the screen is not representative of what I'm seeing on my component. But what I can show you is, since I switched over, because I'm rolling these values on my component, and it is changing these, I'll click the button that is, I'm gonna click this button right here, and that's going to switch me over to where I'm dealing with this radio. So I've clicked it, and now I'm going to start rotating, and you can see it switching here. Okay, scroll over a little bit more. I'm going to click this button right here. I have clicked it, and I'll start playing with these. Okay, let's go back over to the first one. So now I'm back over to this comm radio. I'm changing. Okay, if I want to switch while I'm flying, it's great. I'll just click the middle button, which is this guy right here, and look at that, they're switching. Okay, so it's pretty cool. Anyway, all right, so I know I've covered a lot. I hope I was able to be at least a little bit helpful. And if you have any other questions, I'm glad to answer them. You can just leave comments, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. But anywho, good luck. I spent many days trying to sort this out and figure it out, and it's not the most fun at first. But like I said, once you figure it out and you start to, everything kind of comes together, you realize this is actually really fun. And so that's that. Thanks for watching. Ciao.